welcome to Talking Youth Work. My name is Anita Silva, and together with Rui Branco, we interview experts and practitioners that have a say when it comes to innovation in youth work. This current series is funded by the project Inception of Learning, that is funded by the European Commission through the Erasmus Plus Youth Key Action 2 projects. This project aims to support youth workers, trainers, and educators in delivering quality learning experiences in the field of youth in the context of Generation Z and Generation Alpha. In this episode, we are diving into a topic that I find both exciting and absolutely essential for the future of our democracies: youth participation. We were talking about how young people show up, Gen Alpha specifically, how they speak up. How do they take part in participatory processes? And how that capacity to participate has been transformed by the digital culture they grow up in, by the polarized narratives around them, by misinformation, for example. To help us explore this, we were joined by two wonderful guests from CoGlobal. CoGlobal is an organization that promotes participatory democracy amongst governments, but also they go to schools. And so we talked with Andrés, Falk, and Marcela, Guerrero, and they've been working with children and designing programs for children and young people, redesigning these democratic spaces in such a way that young people can learn how to participate, learn how to dialogue and take decisions together. And they've done that in participatory budgeting in schools, in youth councils, in citizens' assemblies. And what I love about their work is that it's not just theory. It's applied, it's playful, it's innovative, and it really puts kids in the driver's seat. Settle in, folks. We're about to explore how democracy can evolve when we actually listen to these kids, but also how can we as adults support them to gain the capacity to change the world. So as usual, let's talk youth work. Hi, dear listeners. Hi, Andrés, Marcela, and Rui. Thank you so much, Andrés and Marcela, for accepting our invitation. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we start just by sharing shortly where are we Zooming from, because this is recorded via Zoom. I'm in Lisbon. Rui, where are you?
Near Cascais, also in Portugal.
Andrés?
And I'm calling from Malaga in Spain.
Me, I am from Lima, Peru.
Very nicely. We're nicely spread this time. So we have two guests today on our little episode. And I would start maybe inviting Marcela to share a bit of your professional journey and what led you to work right now at CoGlobal as a project manager.
Thank you, Anita. Well, I started first of all in clinical psychology and get specialized in psychotherapeutic work with groups based on psychoanalysis and expressive art psychotherapy. But little by little, I combined private practice with community mental health interventions, especially with people affected by the internal armed conflict that took place here in Peru in between 1980 and 2000. And with the later process of building collective memory and national reconciliation, as well as development programs in areas of social exclusions, which ultimately became the path I chose. So after that, I moved to Spain. I joined the CoGlobal team as a participation facilitator in 2017, and found there a very interesting field in which I can put all these previous experience into use.
Sounds a very, very rich experience. Thank you. What about you, Andrés? How did you end up as executive director of CoGlobal?
Well, trying to make a long story short, I started off studying geography, and somehow linked that at a certain point in my life with international development aid. I became involved in a province government in Malaga, coordinating development aid and also international relations, and created, together with others, coordinated a network of cities in Spain and Latin America around certain policies. And between these policies were the fostering of participatory democracy. So after that phase, I continued working in participatory democracy, which was something I found highly interesting. Later on, I had a master's degree in political science and in co-global. Initially, we started working with adult participation, participatory budgeting, and other sorts of participatory bodies and policies. And at a very early stage, we felt the need to go further back in time and start working with children and youth in creating, let's say, this democratic culture that you need to foster participation. And that more or less leads me to this podcast.
It's great to have you both here. You're both working at Co-Global, which is a Spanish organization, or at least is rooted in Spain. Maybe I ask Andrés, can you briefly describe the work that you are doing at Co-Global, specifically with Gen A and Gen Z?
Yeah, so we have, since we started in 2014, as I said, diving into this population segment, right? We started off with our own methodologies, but soon we also kind of spread out to very different ways of doing participation with children. So we have been designing and facilitating youth councils, children and youth councils on a municipal level. We have also been carrying out youth PB or school PB. PB is participatory budgeting. And we are currently starting with citizen assemblies with children and young people. So we can't talk too much about that because it's just starting right now. But kind of the central part of our work has been developing a methodology of participation with children in school venues, which we call inclusive classroom-based participation, a little long name. It's the main program related to this methodology is called Agora Infantil, the Children's Agora. And so what we do is that in connection with the local government, normally the local government has assigns a mandate that they want the children to carry out. They want them to decide on something that is of municipal concern, for example, reforming a park or anything else that could be of interest in the children, for the children. And we would select randomly a classroom, a full classroom, and work with that full classroom over several months with sessions of information, needs assessment, deliberation, proposals. And the local government has a commitment of considering the decisions that the children make binding within the limits that have been previously agreed on. And that we carry out with an intersectional approach, a lot of gender awareness, game-based learning. It's given really good results, something we're very proud of. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of the central part of our work.
Sounds amazing. Thank you for explaining us that. I maybe would ask then Marcela more about the process directly in the classrooms and the work you do directly with children and young people. And my question would be, you are facilitating participatory processes with them. From your experience, I think you said you're doing this since 2017 at least, if I understood very well. From your experience, what trends do you observe in children's behaviors in these spaces of participation? Are young people nowadays, Gen A, Gen Z, participating any differently than before?
Yeah, I've been realizing that since 2017 to now on, there are some characteristics that are more clear in this new generation, the Gen A. This generation has grown up in environments where their demands receive immediate response. And in order to engage, they need quick results. So they need agile activities, gaming action, and sometimes some short and concrete formats fits better with this generation. Also, if they don't see what happens with their contributions, they disengage quickly. So that's why it's very important to choose sessions that have clear feedback and concrete results. If we want to work with more complex processes, maybe it's better to divide them into small phases. And when working with participatory process, we have an opportunity that is created that tends to motivate them, because we most of the time work with concrete outcomes and real impact. So in these cases, it's advisable for decisions to be implemented within short timeframes also. This generation also have high sensitivity to coherence and fairness. They notice very quickly when they are not truly being taken into account. So that's make them very critical with adults. And when the process is perceived as just for show, rejection increases. Mm-hmm. In fact, they show greater motivation for what directly affects their immediate environment. And when they perceive capacity and influence, of course. By contrast, abstract topics mobilize them less until they are connected to concrete experiences. So that's a very important thing to take into account when working with children. Also, they have some really interesting topic of interest about animal welfare, the environment, or gender equality, although their opinions are also polarized in these topics. And this is a very important thing to take into account, the polarization of the opinion and all the information that is in websites and everything. We are noticing that it's more intensely right now, boys and girls arrives with very radicalized positions and narratives supported by data, information, and misinformation that closely resembles on what's circulating on social media.
Can I just interrupt you just to ask you more about that, because I find that so interesting, because also Andrés was mentioning that in the design process you take care about these gender issues. And now you're mentioning that you notice that new generations, if I understood well, there's a bigger gap in the opinions of boys and girls, and both are very polarized and influenced by what information is circulating online. Did I got that right? Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, of course. Yes, they arrive to classroom having all this information in their minds, mm-hmm. and very radicalized opinions, one from one side and the others. And it's also very loaded with very intense emotions, mm-hmm. such as indignation or anger. And it's also very clear in the classroom. Mm-hmm. This is like an important thing to take into account when you try to work with debating or facilitate the deliberative process. So if you work with these sensitive topics, these kind of emotions are really close and really appears very intense in the class. So it's very important to manage these kind of emotions, mm-hmm. also, and help them to try to express themselves and try to interact and listen to each other's opinions. That's the important part of the process in this kind of topics working with.
Yeah. And
I can
Andrés. Mm-hmm.
just step in with a little note. So we're working gender here on two levels. So sometimes the actual topic of discussion and participation is gender equality and how it should be addressed in school or the municipality or whatever. But even though it's not like the topic of discussion, gender issues are like in the background of the whole participatory process. So especially when we're working, like we normally work with children in ages 10 to 12. And gender is starting there to become like a huge divide. So if you, for example, ask the classroom to divide up in groups, like spontaneously, normally you will find girls working with girls and boys working with boys. So that this divide will be kind of, it would be kind of, it would be inserted into the participatory process. So the facilitator has to be very aware of the situation, has to be working on how the groups are divided, smaller groups where boys and girls can get into meaningful conversations on a more equal basis, right? This is a very important part of our design.
So you make deliberately mixed groups, gender-wise?
Not only gender-wise, because we have this intersectional approach. What we observe with younger children is that maybe, so there are certain, like, let's say, external aspects as gender or capacities or so on that can have quite a lot of weight in how there's relations, but there's also a whole thing about exclusion through friendship or lack of friendship within the classroom, which has a very strong weight in how they relate to each other and how they participate. So our facilitators are specifically trained to be observing these different dynamics that are in the classroom and trying to mix the groups of those who could be more excluded within the classroom and those who have a stronger leadership.
I have one question. Is maybe it's like a going back question, not so. It's when did you both started feeling the need to educate in participation, because people are naturally have opinions, but to have to educate participation, is that what did you start to feel that we need to educate to better participation?
Do you want to start, Marcela?
Well, I think from the beginning. I mean, we are talking about this Gen A, but we realize that some of these things we're talking about, for example, the polarization of the opinions, are happening in everyone. But this generation are growing with this. So it's very important to work with them and try to help them to develop all these kind of capacities, dialoguing, listening to each other, and working together to create something new, listen to different opinions, and have their own opinion, not repeating everything they're listening to. So just to answer the question, for me, it was something I realized from the beginning. From the first time I just have a first contact with a group, I realized groups are a very important way to work with human beings and to help them to build some citizenship together.
Yes, I think in more or less in the same light. When I started working with adult participatory processes and observed how most adults, they lack some very basic skills of just like a normal conversation that leads to a decision making, right? So there's this lack of skills of listening, of being respectful of other people's decisions, of avoiding prejudice and stereotypes when we are dealing with each other. And the thing is that there's kind of an expectation that that kids shouldn't get involved in politics, and then they're in schools, and in schools, kind of most decisions are made by others, and there are very hierarchical. So, teachers have a very strong influence on whatever happens in the classroom. And then from one day to the next, they become 18, and then they should be like expert citizens, having like really strong ideas about how decisions should be made. And that doesn't really make sense. I mean, we learn everything by doing, by sharing, and by hearing others that have done it before. This shouldn't be different.
Yeah. This goes in line with what we see also in other initiatives of youth work, that critical thinking, dialogue, these are all skills that need to be practiced more and more, and somehow school sometimes doesn't answer that need. And nowadays, with the advent of internet and smartphones, it seems that is even more kind of a need for in presence skills of discussion. I have a bunch of questions. I'm super curious about what you find in the classrooms. But there's one thing that struck my mind, and maybe I don't know, for whoever wants to answer really. Opinions are definitely more polarized. I'm guessing this happens because information itself is more widely distributed and available in the platforms, TikTok, Instagram, the platforms that young people are in, and that information is also more polarized. Is that the reason? Is my perception correct, or is there other reasons for why kids are having more polarized opinions than before?
I think that's one of the main reasons, because they are always receiving the same information from websites and for social media, and they are getting used like there are no reference for opinion, so they can say whatever they think, and there's some let me think the word, the word, but it's really anger discourses rolling into the social media. So
anger discourse, yeah.
Yes, and I think there's something important to take into account when we are working with this generation, because they are getting used to be very aggressive in their expressions on the social media. We all are getting into that, but for this generation, it's very important to take them out of that, take them out of those information that are all in website, and help them to have their own opinion, and help them to learn how to listen to each other's opinions also, and to respect different opinion, and to find out that they can also learn from the other one. So, yeah.
Would you like to add anything to that, Andrés?
No, not really. I think
but
then I have
would
another
like
question.
I like to add
go
something.
ahead,
because I was thinking in previous generations, our life didn't have an algorithm, so we were meeting different people with different opinions. When you have an algorithm that it's a big part of your life, it's curated to one point of view. Because if you went to the street and talked to the lady that sold flowers, to the person that sold the bread, to your uncle that used to live wherever, your opinions wouldn't be pointed to just in one direction. You had mixed sources of information, and when you have an algorithm, it's easier to get polarized.
Yes, that's why I was talking about you're listening always the same information because of the algorithm, because it's always sending you the same, and you start to believe that that's the truth and the other one's wrong and you are right. And then we are going to start attacking each other, and so that's something we don't want. So it's very difficult to work with children that are all the time receiving this kind of information.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I never thought about that. I mean, we talk a lot about the echo chambers that adults are in, but I think I've never computed still that also children, Gen A, so at that young age, they are also somehow in echo chambers of information, which obviously has a lot of impact on how we design learning for them. And on that, I would have a question for Andrés. You mentioned that your processes take several months. You work with a classroom, and then for a sequence of sessions over several months, they go through a participatory process. Can you tell us a few things that you have to, some strategies, some design strategies that you have to consider, or that you considered to include some of these characteristics, either the polarization or the intersectionality that is needed nowadays, or their relation with technology? How is this influencing the way you designed these processes?
Mm-hmm. So I would start off just like honestly saying that when we started designing this, polarization was not like a big thing. So this is something that we have been dealing with incrementally over the last years, but it wasn't like a key issue when we started the design. Then again, Marcela can share some specific strategies that we've been using for polarization in this like very new way of expression. When we started the design, the cornerstone of our work was democratic inclusion. So what we kind of felt was, this whole observation of people feeling disengaged from democracy, feeling that institutions don't respond to their needs, that they have their own agenda, and so on. And also the other way around, being fair. Institutions feeling that citizens are just worrying about their own private matters and don't really care about the big picture, right? So looking from below, from the people, from the lay people, if you please, we saw that there's, in all generations, you're going to find people who have this spontaneous need to participate, to be part of the political conversation, to at some point get engaged in organizations, CSOs, on political level, political parties. And what we kind of felt was that when institutions were addressing young people and children, when they were creating participatory bodies, they were basically having a conversation with these young people who, on their own means, were going to be achieving a certain empowerment within society. And what we felt was that wasn't going to solve anything, because if there is a divide between those who participate and those who don't, then we need to address those who don't, especially, right? And that's why we focused on the classroom as a whole, because in a classroom, I know not in all contexts it's the same thing, but if you go like to a rural municipality in Spain, the kids in that classroom will be a full representation of all the children that you have in that municipality, right? So you'll have all sorts of profiles. And we said, okay, so we have to work on something that get them all involved. And we believe that we have had success if those who were very little involved at the beginning are somewhat more involved at the end. We weren't very worried about those who have like strong leaderships and a lot of initiative, how to get them to join in. We weren't very worried about like the quality of the decisions, of the outcome, like didn't have to be like brilliant, innovative ideas. What we wanted to was to level the class and having more people engaged at the end. And that's worked really well. And then one thing that happens at the same time as a byproduct that we didn't expect was that the relations within the classroom improve significantly. So we're talking about, we've been doing measurings. So we're talking about between 30 and 60% of the children in the classroom who, before the intervention, feel isolated, don't have friends, don't have anybody to share with, between 30 and 60% of them get integrated into the classroom dynamics through these processes. And we know it's through the processes because we've also been measuring classrooms, like let's say the classroom next door that hasn't been involved in the intervention, right? So we've been doing these paired measurements. And so that has also made it much easier for us to get schools to open their doors and allow us to work over several months with the group in class time, because they kind of feel that we improve the relations in the class, and a classroom with better relations is also a classroom that is more efficient, that has better notes, and so on. So participation has an impact on much more than just decision making.
Okay, so would you say that your design strategy is mostly focused on creating this participatory equality, that everybody gets on the same level independently of their family background, their grades, their gender, if they're popular or not in school, their status, their ranking in the class?
That is definitely the central focus. And now I see that I didn't answer fully your question. So that was our focus then. And now we have to start developing new tools that are more related to these specific ways of expression within the classroom. So like polarization, radicalization, confrontation, use of bad language. All these situations put you a little bit on the... They're testing your capability of adapting this design to the new situation. But I think, Marcela, you can share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, maybe when I was thinking about what we are going to work today, I was remembering one case in one class that I think it can summarize what we are talking about and how did we manage this. Because, well, let me tell you, this experience was not facilitated by me directly. I was in charge of designing the methodology and monitoring the process, but I had to work very closely with a facilitator. This was a process called Cooperate for SDG 5. So we were talking about gender equality, and it opens a participatory space with children in about 13 or 14 years old. And the idea is to aim them, to encourage them to design and develop awareness campaign for their peers around gender equality from a local, global perspective. That's the whole idea of the project. And we've been working with this project since, I think, 5 years ago. So this last year, we especially find out that the children were really more polarized in their ideas. So we always start this kind of process with an initial debate, so we can listen what their opinions are and how do they think and everything. And we noticed that boys and girls arrived this time with a lot of information, preconceived, polarized opinion, very aligned with those narratives currently circulating on social media. And so the first challenge for the facilitator was to have a respectful debate, to let them listen to each other, tolerate different opinions, and also containing these emotions of anger, indignation, confusion was all circulating in the class this time. So we started working with more gaming strategies. So to help them to take them out from those from the verbal narratives that were circulating in those moments, to help them activate other channels of expressions, promote reflection through the experience. That was the key element to help them to find their own opinion. So it allowed the group to step back from those learned narratives and feel, reflect, and find their own opinion. But the thing is that at the end of one session, one student approached the facilitator and gave her this kind of sheet with some statements and statistical data that was some kind of contradictional information, was opposite from the things we were talking about before. So the first reaction of any adult could be some kind of I don't know, maybe you can get you can get confused with this information, maybe you can't realize what's happening, but the facilitator just say thank you to him, receive the information, and promise him to answer to all these questions, all the information she received. When we study the paper he gave to her, we find out that it was all false information. There was some sources that weren't real, that doesn't exist at least. So we gave him some personalized feedback with cross-checking information with official sources, all the links, so he can find out everything that's were included in this paper. And at the same time, we gave the group also some tips and guidance of the importance of verifying the information and to receive, to just look for the real information and find out their own opinion. So it helped them to realize that we were really listening to them. We are not in those spaces just to give them information and that's all. The gaming really helps. Also helping them to start dialoguing, to start listening to each other, to find out their own information helps them also. We have to modify the methodology, so that's an important thing to take into account when you're working with children and with people in general. You must have some flexibility with your work. You don't know what's going to happen with any group you find out. And at the end, the group managed to share their reflections, listen to each other, and also develop a script for a radio podcast that was recorded at the end of the process. So I think it was a really good process, and we started dealing with this polarization. We started dealing with this aggressive performance of the group, but they also make an effort. This guy that gave her this paper make an effort writing it and finding out all the information, and we thought that he was reaching for orientation. So that's why we answered to that information.
And that they also make efforts. I wanted to ask you, what do you see as these generations also strengths and potential? What is actually now what's available to them, or what are they developing themselves that can support better participation?
First of all, they are very sensitive to justice and injustice. They engage strongly if they realize their opinion are taken into account, and if the topic we are talking about are interesting for them and truly matters what they do in the processes. They have great ability for communication in different ways, visual, brief, narrative, digital, whatever. They really learn quickly through the exploration, trial, and mistakes and error with topics that are for their interests. That's very important. So in this example, for example, this guy was interested in the topic because, after that, he talked about her grandmother that was making some politics and have something about gender equality that doesn't fit with what we were talking about. So there was some personal interest in the topic. They really want to know about everything. So they search for information if you guide them, if you help them. if you doesn't lack these kind of abilities. And they are really creative in with finding solutions and propose problems. In some spaces that they find out that are care, that tolerate mistakes, doesn't punish them, and help them find different information, imagine creative alternative to problems. So I think they have really, really good potential, but you must try to help them to build this space that feel care and can help them to express themselves.
Yeah, and that links very well with another episode we had here talking about psychological safety and what are these psychological safe spaces that I'm sure it's what you're trying to also design into the processes that you take to these schools. Andres, I wanted to ask you a question that it comes more from maybe a personal perspective on this, but I was reading a sentence that kind of struck a chord with me in your website, and you were saying that democracy is sick, and to heal democracy, we need more democracy. And I wanted to ask you, a very inspiring sentence, by the way, but I wanted to ask you, do you feel that this new generation is ready to be involved in more democracy, to be part into participatory society, or in the ecosystems, or to create the ecosystems that are needed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very sure about it. So first thing is that this generation has, they have the knowledge, they have education, they have capacities, much more than if we go like 3-4 generations back. They are dwelling with the algorithms and with a lot of people behind those algorithms with very specific intentions. And that is going to be their struggle as a generation. I kind of feel personally that all I can do at this point is try to give support to find methodologies that makes it easier for them. But I really think that is something that they have to struggle with. And I'm pretty sure they can struggle with that as other generations have been struggling with dictatorships or other strong restrictions for democracy. So the thing is that when we very frequently mistake democracy with the institutions that we have created to organize democracy. So we confuse democracy with elections, or we confuse democracy with parliament. And so I'm not saying elections and parliament is not part of democracy, but that is not like democracy at its full, or even at its best, right? Maybe one of the things that adults are struggling with is that maybe we're going to be seeing ways of democracy that don't relate to many things that we have grown up with, and that we kind of feel, if we don't have, certain institutions and we don't have democracy, maybe we can have other institutions. I'm very interested in seeing how this tension that we're living nowadays is gonna work out. But definitely, I'm sure that they have the tools. I'm also very sure that they're going to struggle with it. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, I think we all will struggle with the relationship with algorithms. We're close to finishing our conversation, and before we do that, I'm going to ask Rui to share a question that our previous guest left for you. Rui.
The question that our previous guest left was, what if we had to redesign youth work from scratch with no previous references?
And whoever wants to take that on, please.
I mean, I definitely want to.
You want to redesign?
So I would say that doesn't sound very bad. You know, if we could start over again and thinking out of the box and not having to comply with 200 years of history of contemporary democracy or contemporary democratic institutions, maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing. Our current democracy has been building on stratified versions of democracy, of democracies where only white adult men with property could be voting. And that evolution, very short evolution, if you think of it, historically, 200 years has left, has brought us to where we are now. So maybe we didn't have to build on that democratic culture, maybe we would be better off. And specifically when we're talking about youth and children, I would say that there has been some, let's call them sins of institutions when they have tried to bring in young people and children in decision making. So some capital sins. So capital sin number one is trying to replicate the same institutions that we have been using for adult or general population or children. So many of these youth councils you see, right, that very formalized, where these young people show up in suits and ties and try to do the same things as is being done in other institutions that are profoundly in crisis and have strong trust issues. Why should we be replicating that in the same way? The second capital sin is not thinking about youth and children's participation as an area of open innovation and creation, where from children themselves and young people themselves, they can be building other ways of creating democratic relationships. So I would be very happy addressing that question if it was an option.
Thank you. And I don't know if who would like to leave a question for our next guest. What would that be? And one of you or both of you, it's fine, whoever wants to answer.
Well, we've been talking about that kind of question we should create for this new person. And since we've been talking about polarization, maybe the question will be, how are you working with the polarization right now? How do you deal with the polarization in your work daily?
Right, that's a good question. Thank you.
A simple question. A simple question, yeah.
Maybe not a simple answer though, but a simple question for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to talk with you, and time just flew away. I wish you all the luck and success for your projects, and safe trips wherever you need to go next. And yeah, I'm sure we will keep talking about these issues and hopefully supporting practitioners in improving their work as well. In the texts that we add to this podcast, we will also add the links to CoGlobal and maybe on some tools that can be useful as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been great being sharing this moment. Bye-bye.
This podcast was brought to you by Team Mais, recorded and edited by Rui Branco for the international project Inception of Learning, financed by the Erasmus Plus program. Our great partners for this project are the associations Fundacja Instytut Innowacji from Poland, Jasna Idnina from North Macedonia, and Odd Socks from Montenegro.